Over 5 centuries ago, while barbarians were inhabiting the wilds of North America, there lived in Peru a cultured and intelligent people who were ruled by Incas or kings. And today, on the plantation of Chiclin, near the city of Trujillo, colorful scenes are reenacted by the native Indians, which illustrate something of the pomp and pageantry that was typical in the land of the Incas, just prior to the Spanish conquest, an empire which embraced that part of South America, comprising the republics of Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, and northern Chile. The origin of the Inca civilization is unknown, but an Indian legend tells of a wise woman called Mama Huaco, who gave birth to a male child conceived by the sun. The savage tribes, believing in this miraculous conception, became sun worshippers and acknowledged the child of the sun as their Inca. The child was named Manco Capac, and he grew up to be marvelously wise and just. He married his own sister, and the line of the Incas ever afterwards was kept pure in its royal strain through the marriage of brothers with sisters, a custom which was also practiced by the ancient pharaohs of Egypt. The total duration of the Inca dynasty has been estimated at about 500 years, and Manco Capac, the first Inca, is believed to have been born in the early part of the 11th century. The two sons who inherited the throne of the last great Inca fell to quarreling over the division of the empire, and it was in the midst of a civil war that the Spanish adventurer, Pizarro, arrived in Peru and took quick advantage of a country divided against itself. This historic event is one of the highlights in native pageantry at Chiclin, although it requires a considerable stretch of the imagination to believe that the capture of the Inca was quite as simple as we see it here. Yet it is true that a comparatively few Spanish soldiers, aided by horses and guns that were formerly unknown to the Peruvians, succeeded in acquiring the coveted land of the Incas, which at that time was the wealthiest country to come under the vast dominion of Spain. Following the conquest of Peru, the ancient and holy city of Cusco was gradually transformed into a typical Spanish town as we see it here. Throughout the world, there are certain historic landmarks which represent vital changes in the story of mankind. And one of these is the Plaza de Armas at Cusco, which was once the hub of the great Inca Empire, as well as the setting for thrilling scenes in the drama of a powerful dynasty that flourished for 5 centuries and then passed into oblivion when touched by the armored hand of another civilization. The mark of Spain has firmly planted itself upon Cusco, but even today we behold in the narrow streets an occasional reminder of the scenes that were typical in the days of the Incas, when the Indians drove their flocks of llamas through the town, and life was a daily routine of peace and simplicity. Llamas are native of Peru. Their fleeces and hides are valuable commodities, and they are chiefly employed as beasts of burden. Like camels, they can travel for days without water. They are docile by nature, and it is only when overloaded that they become unruly. As a matter of fact, a llama usually determines what its maximum load shall be, and it will stubbornly refuse to carry 1 pound overweight. Although Cusco is essentially a Spanish city, it still contains interesting evidences of its far more distant past. The Spanish church of Santo Domingo, for example, was built upon a great stone foundation, which was once part of the ancient Inca Temple of the Sun. And in several of the city streets, we behold huge stone walls, dating back to Inca times, but still in practical use. Overlooking the city is the great Inca fortress of Sacsayhuaman, regarded as one of the wonders of the world. About 20,000 men are said to have been employed in building this great fortress, and over 50 years consumed in its construction. When we consider that these enormous stones were hewn from their native beds and fashioned into shape by a people who were ignorant of the use of iron or cement, and were brought from quarries 10 to 15 miles distant without the aid of beasts of burden, transported across rivers and ravines, and raised to the positions in which we see them here, and all done without the knowledge of tools or machinery familiar to modern engineering, when we consider this, we are inclined to agree that Sacsayhuaman is verily one of the wonders of the world. The native Indians who now pass within the shadow of this gigantic fortress are not unlike those who were engaged in its construction, for time has wrought very little change in the life of the Peruvian Indian since the days of the Incas. The numerous bridges which span the turbulent rivers of rural Peru have also changed but little in the style of construction since Inca times. No visit to Peru is complete without a trip to Machu Picchu, the most famous ruin in South America, which was discovered by Professor Hiram Bingham in 1914. And the route to this wondrous landmark takes us through the sacred valley of the Incas, across the swift-flowing Urubamba River, a spectacular tributary of the Amazon. After a 3-hour climb, we behold Machu Picchu, the deserted Inca city, built upon the peak of a mountain where 10 centuries or more ago, a thriving population of sun worshippers lived as close as they possibly could to the great orb of day. Here, too, we wonder how these gigantic stones were transported to such dizzy heights, and how long it must have taken to construct this fairy-like city, literally built in the clouds and approached from the valley by a series of stone staircases that are still in a remarkable state of preservation. The terraced gardens were a feature of Inca cultivation, as it was only by this method that edibles could have been grown on the sides of the mountains. Although the solution to the mystery of this deserted city is locked in the graves of its builders, its ruins are sufficient to reveal the workings of a despotism which had the lives and fortunes of its vassals at its absolute disposal, and esteemed these vassals, when employed in its service, as lightly as the brute animals for which they served as a substitute. And this was only one of the many cities in the vast Inca Empire, which has long since passed away, leaving to humanity nothing but a memory and a few lifeless ruins, a pathetic reminder of the ultimate result of vesting too much power in despotic rulers, who at best are as human and as fallible as the people they rule. And it is with this thought that we say farewell to Peru, the land of the Incas.